You wouldn't believe the kind of drama that can unfold on a cruise ship, especially when all you're trying to do is relax and enjoy yourself. I thought this vacation would be nothing but calm waters, bright sunsets, and maybe a little adventure here and there. What I didn't expect was that one simple fishing line would turn into a full-blown battle of pride, authority, and downright absurdity. Picture this. I was standing at the very back of the cruise ship, right on the open deck where hardly anyone ever goes. The sea stretched endlessly behind us, the waves rolling like liquid glass reflecting the late afternoon sun. I had brought along a compact travel fishing rod. Nothing fancy, just a little something to drop a line in the open ocean while the ship sailed. I wasn't trying to catch anything huge. Honestly, I just wanted the quiet rhythm of casting out, waiting, and seeing if luck was on my side. The sound of the line zipping out over the railing felt therapeutic. For a few minutes, I was in my own world. Then, out of nowhere, a voice cut through the peace like a foghorn. "Excuse me, you can't do that here." I turned around, and there she was. The woman every cruise seems to have. The one people whispered about at the buffet line. Her name, I would soon learn, was Karen. She had the posture of someone who thought the entire ship belonged to her, and a glare sharp enough to slice steel. "You can't fish off the side of a cruise ship," she snapped, folding her arms. "It's against the rules." Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't entirely sure if she was right. I hadn't exactly checked the official cruise handbook before packing my fishing rod, but something about the way she barked those words, as if she were the captain herself, instantly rubbed me the wrong way. "Really?" I asked calmly, reeling in the line. "Because the last time I checked, you don't run this ship." That lit the fuse. Her face turned red, and she started waving her hands around, declaring she was going to report me to the staff. Passengers nearby began slowing down, curious about the commotion. What had started as a quiet hobby suddenly turned into an unexpected showdown. What I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. Karen wasn't just going to complain, she was about to set something in motion that neither of us could have predicted. The moment Karen stormed off, muttering about rules and authorities, I knew this wasn't over. She strutted down the deck like she was on a mission, her sun hat bouncing with each furious step. People glanced my way, some amused, others curious, but nobody seemed particularly bothered by what I was doing. After all, it wasn't like I was dangling a shark over the buffet line. I reeled in my line, thinking maybe I should pack it up and avoid the drama. But then again, why should I? I wasn't hurting anyone, and truthfully, there was something deeply satisfying about watching Karen get flustered over something so harmless. I decided to stay put. 10 minutes later, she returned, and she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a cruise staff member in a crisp white uniform. He had the weary look of a man who had probably dealt with countless ridiculous complaints on this trip already. "There!" Karen exclaimed, pointing at me like she had just discovered a pirate sneaking on board. "He's fishing off the side of the ship. That has to be illegal." The staff member sighed, walked up to me, and asked politely, "Sir, are you fishing?" I smiled, holding up the little travel rod. "Just passing the time." Karen interrupted. "It's dangerous. What if he hooks someone? What if he catches a whale? What if—" Her imagination was clearly running wild. The staff member raised a hand to silence her and turned back to me. "Technically, sir, we don't have an official policy against it, as long as you're being safe and not interfering with other guests. But—" He hesitated, clearly trying to balance diplomacy with peacekeeping. Karen gasped. "You can't be serious. You're just gonna let him dangle hooks into the ocean while I'm trying to enjoy my vacation?" The staff member gave her a tired smile. "Ma'am, the ocean is very big. I don't think his fishing line will disturb it." That response nearly made me laugh out loud, but I kept my cool. Karen, however, was fuming. Her cheeks turned bright pink as she sputtered, "Well, if you won't do anything, then I will! He'll regret this!" And with that, she stomped off again. The staff member gave me a shrug and wandered away, clearly done with the theatrics. I should have taken the win, packed up my rod, and enjoyed the sunset. But something told me Karen wasn't finished. And boy, was I right. Because later that evening, under the glow of the ship's lights, she would make her move, and it would backfire spectacularly. That evening, the ship transformed. The sun sank below the horizon, and the decks glowed with warm lights as music drifted from the lounge. Most passengers were gathered for the nightly show, but I had other plans. I grabbed my rod again, slipped out to the quiet aft deck, and let my line sink into the dark waters. The ocean at night has a different kind of magic. Mysterious, endless, and full of possibility. I was lost in the rhythm of casting when I heard the unmistakable click of high heels on the deck. My stomach dropped. Sure enough, there she was, Karen, lurking in the shadows, like some self-appointed security guard. Well, well, she hissed. I knew you couldn't resist. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you're in? I stayed calm. Pretty sure I'm fine. The staff already told you it's not against the rules. Her grin widened. Not if I catch you breaking them. You see, I've already spoken to the captain's assistant. They weren't very interested. But if I can prove you're causing a disturbance, then you'll have no choice but to face consequences. The way she said prove made me uneasy. Sure enough, she held up her phone, already recording. She was narrating like a newscaster. Here we have a reckless passenger, endangering the safety of the ship by throwing sharp hooks into the ocean. I rolled my eyes. Karen, I'm fishing, not firing torpedoes. But she wasn't backing down. She leaned closer, determined to catch me doing something she could exaggerate into a crime. That's when karma, or maybe just the sea, decided to intervene. With a sudden jerk, my line tightened. Something big had taken the bait. My rod bent almost in half, and I scrambled to get a grip. Karen shrieked, convinced I'd hooked some monster from the deep. Oh my gosh, he's dragging something onto the ship, she cried, spinning the camera toward the railing. Passengers nearby, hearing the commotion, hurried over. The line thrashed, the reel spun, and everyone leaned in, waiting to see what would surface. Then with one final heave, I pulled up, a giant dripping clump of seaweed. The crowd erupted with laughter. Someone even clapped. Karen, red-faced and humiliated, turned the camera on herself, only to realize she'd just live-streamed her meltdown on the ship's Wi-Fi. Her phone buzzed with laughing emojis from her friends back home. You think this is funny? She snapped. Just wait. I'll show you what happens when you mock me. I knew then she wasn't done. The midnight trap had failed, but she was plotting something bigger, and the storm was coming. The next morning, the ship rocked gently under a clear blue sky. Most passengers were lounging by the pool, sipping fruity drinks and enjoying the day. I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen had cooled off after her humiliating seaweed fiasco. But if I'd learned anything about her by then, it was that embarrassment only fueled her determination. Sure enough, I spotted her later that afternoon, whispering to a small cluster of passengers near the buffet line. She pointed toward me with dramatic gestures, her voice rising just enough for me to catch snippets. Dangerous hooks, reckless behavior, could sink the ship. By evening, I realized she wasn't just gossiping. She was organizing. Karen had recruited her own little army of concerned citizens. They began shadowing me whenever I pulled out my fishing rod, snapping photos, muttering loudly, and trying to intimidate me into giving up. I admit, the attention was uncomfortable. A couple of kids who had been curious about my fishing now looked nervous, thanks to Karen's fear-mongering. Parents pulled them away as if I were some criminal plotting against the cruise line. Finally, things came to a head at dinner. I was enjoying a plate of grilled salmon. The irony wasn't lost on me when Karen marched into the dining hall, flanked by her self-appointed deputies. She slammed a piece of paper on my table. "This is your warning," she declared. "We, the responsible passengers of this ship, demand you stop fishing immediately. If you don't, we'll take matters into our own hands." I glanced at the paper. It was a makeshift petition, scrawled with maybe a dozen signatures. Some were even kids' scribbles, clearly roped in for numbers. Suppressing a laugh, I asked, "Karen, did you just form a vigilante committee to stop me from fishing?" Her eyes narrowed. "Call it what you want, but we'll have you banned from the deck if you keep this up." The surrounding tables were buzzing with whispers and chuckles. Not everyone was on Karen's side. Plenty of people thought her crusade was ridiculous. Still, the scene she was making drew attention from the cruise staff. A manager in a navy blazer approached, trying to defuse the situation. "Ma'am, please," he said. "This is a vacation, not a courtroom." But Karen was relentless. "If you won't stop him, then we will. Just wait. Tonight it ends." Her words weren't just a threat, they were a promise. And I couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to cross a line that even she wouldn't be able to step back from. That night, the tension on the ship was as thick as the humid ocean air. I decided to go about my usual routine anyway, rod in hand, heading to the aft deck where the sea stretched endlessly into the dark. A few curious passengers tagged along, eager to see if the fishing guy would finally land something bigger than seaweed. Of course, Karen was already there. Arms crossed, her little group of followers stationed like bodyguards. She had that smug look, the kind that told me she believed she was minutes away from victory. "You're done," she announced dramatically. "This ends tonight." Before I could respond, she lunged toward me, grabbing for my rod as if snatching it away would prove her point. In the struggle, the line whipped out wildly and splashed into the ocean. Gasps rang out from the spectators. Then, against all odds, the reel screamed. Something huge had taken the bait. The rod bent nearly in half, and everyone, even Karen, froze. Pull it in! Someone shouted. I dug my heels against the deck, gripping the rod with everything I had. The line fought like a wild beast beneath the waves, dragging and thrashing. Passengers crowded the railing, phones out, recording every second. Karen, realizing she was now part of the spectacle, backed away but couldn't hide the shock on her face. Minutes felt like hours as I battled whatever was hooked below. My arms ached, sweat dripped, but I refused to let go. Finally, with one last heave, I pulled the catch up over the railing. Out of the water came, not a fish, not a shark, but a massive barnacle-covered treasure chest. The crowd erupted. Cheers, laughter, and applause filled the air. Someone yelled, "It's like a movie!" Phones flashed as passengers filmed the dripping. Ancient-looking chest sitting on the deck. Karen stood speechless, her carefully built crusade collapsing in an instant. The ship's crew rushed in, inspecting the chest with wide eyes. It turned out to be an old maritime artifact, something that had probably been lost at sea decades ago. By the next morning, it was the talk of the entire ship. The captain himself congratulated me, joking that I had fished up better. Entertainment, then the evening show. The chest was stored safely, destined for display when the crews returned to port. As for Karen, she kept her distance for the rest of the trip, too embarrassed to even look my way. I didn't just fish on that cruise. I reeled in the most unforgettable moment of the entire voyage. And Karen? Well, she learned the hard way that sometimes trying to spoil someone else's fun only ends up sinking your own ship.